It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Malia Hales took her first step down the aisle, radiant in silk and lace, her heart trembling with joy. But then something impossible happened. At the center of the aisle, a massive white wolf with piercing blue eyes stood blocking her path, its gaze locked not on her, but on the groom waiting at the altar. Guests gasped in horror. "How did that animal get in here?" someone whispered urgently. But the wolf didn't move. It stood like a guardian, muscles coiled, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling from its chest. The groom's face went pale. His hands clenched at his sides. And when the wolf suddenly snarled and advanced toward him, chaos erupted. Screams echoed through the sanctuary. Ushers rushed forward. No one understood what was happening. Everyone thought the creature had gone mad, until what happened next revealed a truth so dark, so impossible, it would shatter everything Malia believed about her perfect life. What she discovered in that church would change her forever. Stay till the end, because what this wolf was protecting her from will leave you speechless. Before we reveal the shocking truth behind this mystical guardian, hit like and share your prediction in the comments. Who do you think this wolf really is? And what secret could be worth destroying a wedding to expose? The morning sun rose over the grand estate, casting golden light through the tall windows of the bridal suite. Soft music drifted through the air, mingling with laughter and the rustle of silk. It was the kind of perfect morning that only happens once in a lifetime. The kind that belongs in fairy tales. Malia Hales stood before an ornate mirror, the ivory fabric of her wedding gown cascading around her like moonlight made solid. Her hands trembled slightly as she fastened the antique locket her grandmother had worn on her own wedding day. "You look absolutely stunning," her maid of honor whispered, eyes bright with emotion. "Like something out of a dream." Malia smiled, but her heart was racing faster than it should. She had imagined this day 1,000 times. The cathedral, the flowers, the promise of forever with the man she loved. Everything was perfect, almost. From the corner of the room came a sound that made her pause. Low, uneasy whine. Outside the window in the garden below, she could see movement. A flash of white fur between the hedges. Her breath caught. "Did you see that?" she asked, moving toward the window. Her sister glanced over while adjusting her bridesmaid's dress. "See what? I thought I saw." Malia pressed her hand against the glass, scanning the garden. "Nothing. Just shadows and morning light playing tricks." "Never mind. Wedding jitters, I guess." But the unease didn't leave. It settled into her chest like a stone, cold and heavy. She'd felt it before, actually. Small moments over the past few weeks. Her fiancé's smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The way he'd grip her hand too tightly when she asked certain questions. The strange, old medallion he now wore beneath his shirt that he refused to discuss. "You're overthinking," she told herself quietly. "Everything is fine." Her mother swept into the room, radiant and tearful, holding the bridal bouquet. "Oh, my darling girl. Are you ready?" Malia turned, forcing brightness into her voice. "I'm ready." But as she spoke, a chill ran down her spine. The kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature. The kind that comes from somewhere deeper, more primal. A warning. She shook it off. Today was not the day for doubt. The bridal car waited outside, ribbons fluttering in the gentle breeze. Malia gathered her train and stepped carefully down the stairs, surrounded by her bridesmaids. Everything moved like clockwork. Practiced. Perfect. Beautiful. Yet as she reached the car door, she felt it again. That sensation of being watched. She turned, scanning the tree line at the edge of the property. Just for a moment. Blue eyes. Glowing and fierce. Watching from the shadows. "Malia?" her father asked gently, offering his arm. "Everything all right?" The eyes were gone. Had they ever been there? "Yes," she said softly. "Everything's perfect." But her voice wavered, and her father squeezed her hand as if he too sensed something unsettled in the air. The car glided smoothly through the morning streets, past neighbors waving and children pointing at the decorated vehicle. Malia sat in silence, her bouquet clutched in her lap, trying to focus on the joy she should be feeling. Instead, all she could think about were those eyes. And the dreams she'd been having. Dreams of running through dark forests, of howling wind, of a voice calling her name, warning her, begging her to stop. Just nerves, her father said kindly, as if reading her thoughts. Every bride has them. Did Mom? Malia asked quietly. Your mother was terrified, he admitted with a warm chuckle. But she walked down that aisle anyway. And it was the best decision she ever made. Malia tried to smile, tried to believe him. The car turned the final corner, and the cathedral came into view. St. Michael's, ancient stone and towering spires. Hundreds of guests were already inside. The organ music drifted faintly through the open doors. Everything was in place. Everything except the knot of dread tightening in Malia's chest. As the car pulled to a stop, she took a deep breath. She thought of her fiancé waiting at the altar. The life they'd planned. The future that seemed so certain. But somewhere, buried beneath the hope and the excitement, a small voice whispered a single word. Run. She stepped out of the car, train flowing behind her, veil catching the light. Her father took her arm. The doors opened. The music swelled. And Malia Hales, radiant and terrified, took her first step toward forever. She had no idea that within minutes, a creature out of myth and nightmare would tear through those cathedral doors. That the man she loved was hiding a secret darker than death itself. That her entire world was built on a lie. And that her only salvation would come from the white wolf with blue eyes who'd been watching over her all along. 3 weeks earlier, Malia had laughed off the first sign. She'd been trying on her wedding dress for the final fitting when the temperature in the boutique dropped so suddenly that her breath misted in the air. The seamstress had frowned, checking the thermostat, muttering about broken heating systems. But Malia had felt it deeper than cold air on skin. It was the kind of chill that sank into bones, that whispered of something fundamentally wrong. Just excited, she told herself, watching her reflection in the three-way mirror. The dress fit perfectly. Everything was perfect. The second sign came during the rehearsal dinner. Her fiancé Marcus had been giving a toast. His smile bright and charming as always. But when Malia caught his eye across the table, something flickered there. Something that made his smile seem painted on, a mask that didn't quite fit his face. His hand had found hers under the table, squeezing so hard her ring cut into her finger. I can't wait to make you mine, he'd whispered against her ear, and the words should have sounded romantic, should have made her heart flutter. Instead they'd sounded like a claim, like ownership. She'd pulled away gently, laughing it off. You're such a romantic, she'd said, ignoring the way her pulse raced with something that wasn't quite excitement. Then there were the dreams. Night after night, she'd wake gasping, tangled in sheets damp with sweat. In the dreams, she was running through a dark forest, branches clawing at her wedding dress, ripping it to shreds. Behind her something pursued. Not chasing to harm, but racing to reach her before something else did. And always those blue eyes watching from the shadows. Concerned. Desperate. Warning. Wedding stress, her mother had said when Malia mentioned sleeping poorly. Completely normal, darling. But was it normal to see shadows that moved wrong? Malia had glimpsed it twice now. Once outside her apartment window at twilight, a figure that stood too still, watching her building. And again yesterday at the florist, a silhouette that vanished the moment she turned to look directly at it. Marcus had explanations for everything. The medallion he now wore constantly. A family heirloom. My father insists I wear it for the ceremony. Old tradition. His sudden interest in the exact time of their vows. I want everything to be perfect for you, darling. The light will be best at exactly 4 o'clock. The way he'd cancelled their honeymoon plans at the last minute, insisting they needed to stay at his family's estate instead. It'll be more intimate, more meaningful. Each answer was reasonable. Each smile was convincing. And Malia wanted so desperately to believe in the fairy tale she'd built. The successful businessman who'd swept her off her feet. The whirlwind romance. The grand cathedral wedding. The promise of happily ever after. So she'd pushed down the unease. Ignored the cold touches and colder smiles. Dismissed the shadows and the dreams and the persistent feeling that something precious was slipping away from her with every passing day. Standing now at the cathedral entrance, her father's arm steady beneath her trembling hand, Malia made one final choice. She would believe in the perfect facade. She would walk down that aisle and marry the man waiting there, and everything would be fine. The organ swelled. The doors opened wide. And Malia Hales stepped forward into a truth she could no longer deny. 5 miles away, Theodore Raken felt it. The shift rippled through him like lightning through water, violent and inevitable. His human hands gripped the steering wheel as pain lanced down his spine, his vision blurring between man and wolf. Not now. Not yet. He needed to get there first. But the bond he'd forged with Malia, the ancient protection spell he'd woven around her years ago when he'd first sensed the darkness circling her life, it burned now like a brand against his chest. She was in danger. Immediate. Mortal. The ritual had begun. His truck swerved as his bones began to crack and reshape. Theodore slammed on the brakes, barely managing to pull off the road before his body betrayed him completely. The change took him hard and fast, ripping through flesh and reason. His clothes tore. His human thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. And then there was only instinct, only purpose. Protect her. The white wolf that emerged from the abandoned truck was massive, larger than any natural animal, with eyes that burned electric blue with supernatural fury. Theodore's wolf form was built for battle, for speed, for the singular focus of a guardian who'd failed once before and would die before failing again. He'd been tracking Marcus Thorne for months, had followed the trail of discarded lives, the women who'd vanished after similar ceremonies, the dark magic that clung to the man like rot. Marcus wasn't human, not anymore. He'd sold that away piece by piece in exchange for power, and now he needed one final sacrifice to complete his transformation. A willing bride. A sacred ceremony. Blood freely given through vows spoken in a consecrated space. Malia had no idea she was signing away more than her future. She was signing away her soul. Theodore ran. His paws tore into the earth, muscles burning as he pushed his wolf form beyond its limits. The city blurred past him. Cars honked and swerved. People screamed and pointed. He didn't care. Couldn't care. Every second that passed was another second closer to Malia speaking words that would bind her eternally to a monster. The church spire came into view, and Theodore felt the dark magic pulsing from it like a diseased heartbeat. Marcus had prepared well. The timing was precise. 4 o'clock, when the sun's angle would align with the stained glass, when the ancient words carved into the altar would activate, when Malia's I do would become an irrevocable chain. Theodore could hear the organ music now, floating through the spring air, could smell the roses and the incense, and underneath it all, the acrid stench of blood magic waiting to be triggered. His wolf form snarled, lips pulling back from fangs that had torn through demons and worse. He'd promised to protect her, had watched over her from the shadows for 3 years, ever since the night he'd found her wandering too close to a supernatural battle. Her innate goodness shining like a beacon in the darkness. She'd had no idea how many threats he'd eliminated. How many times he'd shifted in the night to stand guard outside her window. She'd thought the white wolf she occasionally glimpsed was a stray. A beautiful, mysterious creature that appeared and vanished like magic. She had no idea that creature would die for her. The cathedral steps loomed ahead. Through the open doors, Theodore could see the aisle, the guests, and at the far end, Malia in her white dress, her father's arm supporting her as she took her first step forward. Theodore's muscles coiled. And then he launched himself through those doors with a howl that shattered the sacred silence like breaking glass. The wolf's entrance froze time itself. For one crystalline moment, every guest sat paralyzed, minds struggling to reconcile the impossible creature standing in the aisle. Then chaos erupted. Screams tore through the sanctuary. Women clutched their pearls. Men shot to their feet. But the white wolf didn't attack, didn't rampage. It simply stood there, positioned deliberately between Malia and the altar, its blue eyes locked with laser focus on Marcus Thorne. Malia's father instinctively pulled her back. His face drained of color. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice shaking. But Malia couldn't look away from those eyes. They weren't the eyes of a mindless beast. They were intelligent, purposeful, almost pleading. "Someone call animal control," a guest shrieked. Two ushers, young men who'd played college football, moved forward with forced bravado. "We'll handle this," one said, grabbing a brass candelabra like a weapon. They approached slowly, trying to circle the wolf from both sides. The wolf's ears flattened. A warning growl rumbled from its chest, low and resonant enough to vibrate in the bones of everyone present. "Easy now," the usher said, sweating despite his brave words. "Nice doggy. Let's just." He lunged, swinging the candelabra. The wolf moved with liquid speed, impossibly fast, dodging the blow and catching the brass stand in its jaws. With a casual flick of its head, it wrenched the candelabra away and sent it clattering across the stone floor. The usher stumbled backward, eyes wide with terror. The second usher tried to grab the wolf from behind. The creature spun, and suddenly it was the usher on his back, the wolf's massive paws planted on his chest, fangs inches from his throat. The man whimpered, frozen in absolute fear. But the wolf didn't bite, didn't tear. It simply held him there for 3 heartbeats, making its point crystal clear. Then it stepped off, releasing him unharmed, and returned its attention to Marcus. "Enough!" Marcus's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. The groom stepped forward, his handsome face twisted with barely contained fury. Something dark flickered in his eyes, there and gone like heat lightning. "This animal is disrupting our ceremony. I'll remove it myself." "Marcus, wait," Malia called out, but he was already striding down the aisle. The wolf's stance shifted, no longer just defensive. Now it was a predator facing prey, every muscle coiled and ready. Marcus reached out to grab the wolf's scruff, his movements confident, almost arrogant. "Stupid beast," he hissed. The moment his hand made contact, the wolf snarled and something else happened. The air itself seemed to warp around them. The temperature plummeted. Frost crept across the stone floor in spreading patterns. The stained glass windows rattled in their frames. And power radiated from the wolf like heat from a furnace. Not animal power. Not earthly power. Something ancient and primal that made every person in that church feel suddenly, terrifyingly small. Marcus jerked his hand back as if burned, his eyes going wide. For the first time, genuine fear crossed his face. The wolf advanced one deliberate step, then another. Marcus retreated, his polished shoes scraping against stone. His mask was cracking, the charming groom dissolving to reveal something else beneath. "What are you?" Marcus breathed, and his voice carried an edge of recognition, of horror. The wolf's lips pulled back, revealing fangs that seemed too long, too sharp to be natural. And in its eyes burned an intelligence that was undeniably, impossibly human. Malia's hand flew to her mouth. Her father's arm tightened around her. And in the awful silence that followed, everyone in that sanctuary understood the same truth. This was no ordinary wolf. And whatever it was protecting Malia from, it was willing to die to stop this wedding. Marcus's composure shattered like glass. His face contorted with rage, and for one unguarded moment, the mask slipped completely. His eyes went black. Not the pupil, not the iris, but the entire eye, from edge to edge, pools of absolute darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. Gasps echoed through the sanctuary. Malia's mother crossed herself, whispering prayers. The priest stumbled backward, knocking over the ceremonial wine. "You dare!" Marcus snarled, and his voice carried layers that shouldn't exist in a human throat. Multiple tones, some deeper than any man could produce, some high and scraping like nails on stone. You dare interfere with what is mine. He raised his hand toward the wolf, and shadows peeled away from the corners of the cathedral, drawn to him like iron to a magnet. They coiled around his fingers, solid and writhing, darker than the absence of light. The medallion beneath his shirt began to glow with a sickly crimson pulse, visible through the fabric. Several guests screamed and rushed for the exits. Others sat frozen, trapped between disbelief and terror. Marcus! Malia's voice was small, broken. What's happening? What are you? But Marcus didn't even glance at her. His attention was fixed solely on the wolf, on the creature who dared to disrupt his carefully laid plans. I have waited years for this moment, prepared every detail. You will not. The wolf interrupted him with a sound that wasn't quite a growl, wasn't quite a laugh. And then light exploded through the sanctuary. Brilliant, searing white light that forced everyone to shield their eyes. When it faded, the wolf was gone. In its place stood a man. He was tall and lean, dressed in torn clothing that hung in tatters from the shift. His dark hair was disheveled, his face angular and fierce. But it was his eyes that held everyone's attention. The same piercing blue as the wolf's, burning with the same protective fury, the same ancient power. Theodore Raiken, Marcus breathed, and now his voice carried genuine fear. The last guardian of the Crescent Line. I should have known. Theodore's stance remained predatory despite his human form, weight balanced on the balls of his feet, ready to strike. Did you really think I wouldn't find you, Thorn? After what you did to the others? Malia felt her father's arm tighten around her, but she pulled away, stepping forward despite the trembling in her legs. Someone needs to tell me what's happening. Right now. Theodore's gaze flicked to her, and for a moment, his expression softened with something that looked like sorrow. Your fiancé isn't human, Malia. He's a reaper. Soul thief. And this wedding isn't a marriage ceremony. He turned back to Marcus, his voice hardening to steel. It's a binding ritual. The moment she says, I do, her life force becomes his to consume. Just like the 6 women before her. The words hung in the air like poison. Malia's knees went weak. 6 women. 6 lives. And she would have been the 7th. You're lying, she whispered, but even as she said it, she knew he wasn't. Every cold touch. Every calculated smile. Every warning sign she'd dismissed. It all crashed over her like a wave. Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. Such righteousness from a beast who can barely control his own nature. Tell her, guardian. Tell her what you really are. What you want from her. Theodore's jaw clenched. I want nothing except her safety. Liar. Marcus's eyes flared black again, shadows gathering at his feet. You've been stalking her for years. Seth. She's bound to you as surely as she would be to me. The difference, Theodore said quietly, dangerously, is that I'd die before I'd hurt her. Can you say the same? The tension between them crackled like electricity. 2 supernatural powers facing off in a sacred space never meant to contain such darkness. Theodore stepped forward, his voice carrying to every corner of the sanctuary. You want to know why he chose you, Malia? Why he courted you so perfectly? Why every date felt like destiny? Malia couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Because you're not just anyone. Theodore's eyes never left Marcus. You're descended from the Hales bloodline. Ancient. Pure. Your ancestors were healers, light-bearers. That kind of soul energy is rare. Precious. His voice turned bitter. And to a reaper trying to ascend to full demon status, it's irresistible. Marcus's smile was cold and sharp. Such drama, guardian. Must you make me sound so monstrous? You are monstrous. Theodore's hands clenched into fists. The ritual requires more than just consuming her soul. It requires her willing consent, spoken in sacred space, witnessed by the innocent. That's why the church. Why the guests? Why the elaborate wedding? He gestured to the decorated sanctuary, to the flowers and candles that now seemed sinister rather than beautiful. Every tradition, every vow, every "I do" would bind her life force to you permanently. And once the binding was complete, once you'd consumed what made her human, you'd gain enough power to shed your mortal shell entirely. "And the medallion?" Malia's father demanded, his voice shaking with rage. "What is that thing?" "A soul cage," Theodore said grimly. "It holds the essence of his previous victims. 6 women who stood exactly where Malia stands now. 6 women who said, 'I do,' and never saw another sunrise." Horror rippled through the remaining guests. Several more fled for the doors. Marcus's expression darkened. "You've ruined everything," he said softly, and the temperature dropped again. "Years of planning, careful cultivation, all destroyed by a flea-bitten shapeshifter with delusions of heroism." "I've saved her life," Theodore corrected. "That's all that matters." "Saved her." Marcus laughed, and the sound echoed wrong, like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You've only delayed the inevitable. She was meant for me, promised to me by fate itself." "She was never yours," Theodore growled. "Wasn't she?" Marcus turned his black eyes on Malia, and she felt the weight of his gaze like physical pressure. "Tell him, darling. Tell him how right it felt when we met. How perfectly I understood you. How deeply you fell." Malia's throat constricted. It was true. The connection had felt inevitable, like coming home. But now she understood it had been manufactured, manipulated. A trap wrapped in romance. "That wasn't love," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "That was predation." Something flickered across Marcus's face. Rage. Pure, inhuman rage. "If I cannot have you willingly," he said, and his voice dropped to that terrible multi-layered tone, "then I'll take what I need by force." The transformation happened in seconds. Marcus's skin split like tearing paper, revealing something underneath that made people scream. His human form peeled away, and what emerged was nightmare-made flesh. Tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that bent in too many places. His fingers extended into claws like blackened bone. His face elongated, stretched, until it was barely recognizable as anything that had once been human. The black eyes remained, but now they were set in a skull-like visage that wept shadows like tears. The medallion around his neck blazed crimson, and the sanctuary's windows cracked from the pressure of the dark power radiating from him. "This is what you would have married," the Reaper said, its voice now fully inhuman, scraping and hollow. "This is what would have consumed you from the inside out, wearing your love like a costume until nothing remained." Theodore shifted his stance, his body already beginning to shimmer with the signs of transformation. "Malia, get behind me. Now." But Malia stood frozen, staring at the monster that had nearly become her husband, understanding with perfect, terrible clarity how close she'd come to oblivion. Theodore didn't wait for Marcus to strike first. Light exploded around him as he shifted mid-leap, his human form dissolving into the massive white wolf. He launched himself at the Reaper with a snarl that shook the rafters. They collided in the center of the aisle with a force that cracked the stone floor. Shadow met fur and fang. Marcus's claws raked across Theodore's side, drawing blood that glowed silver before fading. But Theodore's jaws found purchase on the Reaper's elongated arm, crushing bone that shouldn't exist in nature. The Reaper shrieked, a sound that shattered 3 stained glass windows and sent shards raining down on the fleeing guests. It threw Theodore off with supernatural strength, sending him crashing into the wooden pews. Splinters flew. The ancient wood collapsed under the impact. But Theodore was already moving again, circling, looking for an opening. His blue eyes tracked every movement, calculating, waiting. The Reaper lunged, shadows coiling around its limbs like living armor. Theodore dodged, impossibly fast, and his fangs found the medallion. "No!" Marcus screamed. Theodore bit down hard, and the soul cage exploded. Light poured from it, brilliant and pure. 6 streams of luminescence shot upward through the broken windows. 6 souls finally freed from their prison. The Reaper staggered, suddenly diminished. The power it had stolen ripped away in an instant. "You've destroyed everything," Marcus rasped, his monstrous form flickering, becoming less solid. "Decades of work. Centuries of planning." Theodore shifted back to human form, breathing hard, blood streaming from the wounds on his ribs. "Good," he said simply. The Reaper's black eyes fixed on Malia one last time. "This isn't over. I will find another way. Another vessel. And you, little bride, will spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering when I'll return." "You won't get the chance," Theodore growled, but even as he moved forward, Marcus's form dissolved into shadow and smoke, dissipating like mist in sunlight. The Reaper was gone, retreating to whatever dark place had spawned it. The sudden silence was deafening. Theodore swayed, and Malia realized how much blood he was losing. Silver droplets stained the white marble, spreading in patterns that almost looked deliberate. His legs buckled, and he caught himself on a broken pew, his face pale. "Theodore," Malia breathed, rushing forward without thinking. She caught him as he fell, her wedding dress cushioning his collapse. His weight was solid and real and terrifyingly cold. "You're safe," he whispered, his blue eyes struggling to focus on her face. "That's all that matters. You're hurt. Someone call an ambulance." He smiled weakly. "Human medicine won't help. I just need time. The silver blood will heal me. It always does." Malia's father appeared beside them, his face ashen but determined. "What do you need, son? Just let me rest. A few minutes." Theodore's eyes closed briefly, then forced themselves open again, finding Malia. "I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. Should have warned you before it got this far. But I thought if I could just eliminate the threat without involving you, without shattering your normal life." "My normal life." Malia's voice cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, though she wasn't sure if they were from fear, relief, or the absolute destruction of everything she believed about the world. "My normal life was a lie. All of it. And you've been protecting me this whole time. Haven't you? The white wolf I sometimes saw outside my building. That was you." He nodded weakly. "For 3 years. Since the night you almost walked into a demon's feeding ground. Your light, your soul, it shines so bright in the darkness. Every supernatural creature within 100 miles could sense you. I couldn't just leave you unprotected." Malia looked down at the man bleeding silver in her arms, at the ruins of her wedding, at her father's stunned face and the few remaining guests cowering in the corners. Her perfect life had shattered. But looking into Theodore's fierce blue eyes, she realized something. She was alive. And the truth, however terrifying, was better than a beautiful lie that would have killed her. 2 hours later, the church stood empty except for the 3 of them. The guests had fled. The priest had called no authorities, his face pale with the knowledge that some truths were too dangerous to share. Malia's mother had taken the bridesmaids home, promising to explain nothing because there was no explanation that would make sense. Theodore sat on the altar steps, his wounds already healing, the silver blood fading to nothing as supernatural flesh knit itself back together. He'd pulled on a jacket someone had left behind, covering the torn remnants of his shirt. His blue eyes watched Malia carefully, as if afraid she might shatter. She stood in the center of the aisle, her wedding dress torn and stained, her carefully styled hair falling loose around her shoulders. She looked like a ghost of the bride she'd been just hours ago. But when she lifted her chin, there was steel in her gaze that hadn't been there before. "Tell me everything," she said. "No more secrets. No more protection through ignorance. If I'm going to live in a world with reapers and shapeshifters and soul cages, then I need to know the rules." Theodore exchanged a glance with her father, who nodded slowly. The older man had taken the revelations better than expected, his protective instincts overriding his disbelief. If this creature had saved his daughter, then he would hear him out. "The world is layered," Theodore began. Most humans live on the surface, never seeing what moves beneath. But the supernatural exists in the spaces between, in the shadows and the forgotten places. Creatures like Marcus hunt there. And creatures like me protect the border, keeping humans safe from things they don't know exist. Why me? Malia asked. You said my bloodline, but there must be others. Why have you spent 3 years guarding me specifically? Theodore was quiet for a long moment. Because when I first saw you, you were helping a homeless woman find shelter. It was raining and you gave her your jacket and your umbrella. You missed a job interview because you stayed to make sure she got inside safely. His voice softened. In a world full of darkness, you chose kindness without hesitation. That kind of soul is rare, Malia. Worth protecting. Worth everything. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back. And now, Marcus said he'd return. That I'd spend my life looking over my shoulder. You won't be alone. Theodore stood, moving toward her with careful, measured steps. If you'll have me, I'll continue what I've been doing. But this time you'll know. You'll be able to see the threats, to prepare, to fight back if necessary. You're asking me to trust you. It wasn't a question. I'm asking you to let me keep you alive. Malia looked at her father, who nodded slowly. Then she looked back at Theodore, at the man who'd destroyed her wedding to save her life. The man who'd bled silver protecting her from a monster wearing a lover's face. She thought of the perfect life she'd planned. The suburban home. The normal marriage. The comfortable ignorance. All of it built on lies. Then she thought of the truth. Dangerous. Terrifying. Real. I choose truth, she said firmly. I choose to know. See. To fight if I have to. She stepped closer to Theodore, her ruined wedding dress trailing behind her like a discarded skin. And I choose to trust the wolf who saved me. Something shifted in Theodore's expression. Relief. Gratitude. Something deeper that he carefully didn't name. Together they walked out of the church, leaving the wreckage of Malia's old life behind. The afternoon sun felt different on her skin now, sharper and more vivid. She could almost sense it, the layer beneath the world she'd always known, humming with danger and possibility. Her father followed a few steps behind, a silent guardian in his own right. Malia Hales was no longer a bride. She was something new. Something forged in the fire of truth and tempered by the knowledge that monsters were real. But so were protectors. And she would never walk in blindness again.